58,220. That's a big number that correlates with going to the afterlife. 58,220 is the number of casualties that the U.S. military suffered in the Vietnam conflict. There are 1,582 military personnel that are still missing in Vietnam and Laos.
Bravo Company, 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry, moved into Cambodia 2 weeks ago and has met with continuous heavy enemy contact.
Even those who came back were changed forever by their experiences in the Orient. What happened to these men? What horrors altered their psyche, and what creatures and demons did they witness in the jungles of Indo-China that made the Vietnam conflict such an infamous military campaign? Welcome to Nutty History. Today we're looking back at the psychological nightmares and unforgettable unique experiences that American troops endured in Vietnam. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as some of this video may be offensive or disturbing. We, the makers of this video, in no way support or condone the actions of the subjects featured. U.S. Army versus nature. The Vietnam conflict was a total game changer for the U.S. Army that had conventionally trained its soldiers in trench warfare. When these troops were airdropped in Vietnam, they felt like they were on an entirely different planet fighting an enemy that didn't feel human. For some, the experience was quite like being a space marine fighting the xenomorphs in the movie Aliens.
Game over, man. It's game over.
The combination of the Viet Cong's guerrilla tactics and the dark, dire jungles that were full of despair and dangers unknown scared the bejesus out of many American troops, and nobody could blame them. They weren't mentally prepared for such an experience in a highly anxiety-driven campaign where demise could leap from any bush, hole, or branch in the wild, and we're not even talking about the Viet Cong's ambushes. When we talk of wars, it is easy to fall for the fallacy of considering only human enemies as adversaries. Wars often test a soldier's resolve against the hazards of nature and the weather as well. Vietnam was quite a challenge, where nature was as deadly as a camouflaged Frank Woods with a weapon from Black Ops. The soldiers were already having a hard time trusting their eyes, and the jungles of Vietnam upped the challenge by making them doubt their instincts. American troops were forced to camp and live in the wilds and sleep on sharp twigs, roots, and stones, while anything from apex predators like Royal Bengal tigers to tiny malaria-carrying mosquitoes that could bite through clothes could seal their fates at any moment. But nothing was deadlier than the slithering camouflage vipers of Southeast Asia. Vietnam is home to about 100 different species of snakes, and while 98 of them are poisonous, the other 2 are capable of crushing their much larger prey to death. According to U.S. National Archives, every year American troops were involved in the Vietnam conflict. The infirmaries and medics reported 25 to 30 cases on average of snake bites there. The aptly named king cobra found in Asia can grow up to 19 feet in length and can raise 1/3 of their body upright in hostile mode, canceling the flight right now to Vietnam. Hello? Hello? Imagine your company has that one brute of a soldier whose towering physique is good enough to make the enemy pee their pants, and then he makes one wrong step in arrogance while out in the jungle. The king cobra rises above his eye level, snarling, growling with eyes that have a look of being an underworld-made abomination. Yeah, you would watch the pants getting wet on the opposite side of the spectrum right there. King cobra's venom contains neurotoxins and cytotoxins, and one bite is enough to end an elephant. These monsters can also fly tree to tree, traversing through branches like Tarzan. If you were busy looking out for them above, another of nature's perfect assassins would be waiting for you to make one wrong move in the grass of Vietnam. The bamboo viper. Extremely hard to discern from the grass and foliage because of their color, bamboo vipers are a force to be reckoned with. Their speed, toxicity, and preference to hunt at night, thanks to their thermal vision, make these pit vipers a formidable adversary. The Viet Cong employed these dangerous predators to guard their rat tunnels. Bamboo vipers and tiger tarantulas as big as dinner plates were often suspended in collapsible baskets in the rat tunnel ceilings as booby traps to take care of their interlopers. Snakes in rat tunnels as booby traps? Indiana Jones was probably very grateful that he was too old to be drafted at that time. Still, it didn't stop a guy named Dale Vaughn from taking a baby cobra he found as a pet. He was a door gunner in the 114th Assault Helicopter Company in the 1st Aviation Battalion, and he stowed his pet in a cooler under his cot. He called that deadly pet O for the large white circle on the back of the head of the reptile. Horrors of the woods. Traversing through these wild forests was no walk in the park. Not just U.S. troops, but even the South Vietnamese Army often required assistance from the locals to understand the topography and the ins and outs of these wild lands. But the locals weren't always enthusiastic to help. There were parts of the woods where they wouldn't dare to step in, and even cautioned the U.S. troops from going there, no matter how crucial it was for them. Vietnamese culture had a lot of emphasis on spirits and the supernatural. These locals believed that in the darker parts of the forest, where the canopies of leaves and branches don't allow the sun to pierce through, ghosts of the restless dead and demons lurked to feed upon the lost souls who wandered too deep. In fact, these strong beliefs even aided South Vietnam and the U.S. Army when they came up with Operation Wandering Soul. However, the locals were not entirely wrong when they warned about the woods coming alive and preying on those who intruded. Spirits or not, the woods themselves were indeed hungry. Or gelsemium could cause soldiers to fall on their knees gasping for air. This grass is poisonous enough to intoxicate someone with the venom it releases in the air. In fact, accidents involving heartbreak grass were quite common in the Vietnam conflict. Another vegetation out to take the lives of the American troops in Vietnam was the elephant grass. The rough, hairy, green, often yellow, 15-foot-tall grass was a nightmare to pass through on its own, seemingly providing perfect cover for ambushes. But even without the Viet Cong jumping out to hurt the soldiers, the grass was deadly enough on its own. The grass, when young, can be a great source of fiber and nutrition in a human's diet. But a field of full-grown elephant grass was like walking through a field of a million knives. The leaves are narrow and have a white central vein, pointed tips, sparse hairs, and razor-sharp edges that are impenetrable. When in contact, this grass will leave agonizing wounds on the soldiers' bodies, and a simple walk through them could be as deadly as the old medieval Chinese punishment of death by 1,000 cuts. The most deceptive of all were the rattan plants, which infamously got the name "wait a minute" for the sudden realization and shock it caused among the troops. The seemingly immobile veins would constrict unsuspecting troops around the neck or arms. According to Tim Lickness, 104th Airborne Division, the vines would hoist them high in the air as the cable-like plantation will hook onto and even tear skin and clothing to feed upon its prey. At the same time, more vines would create an inescapable net around the victim. The irony? U.S. troops preferred to take risk with these deadly plants over safer trails because these vines didn't differentiate between the U.S. and Viet Cong for victims, making it impossible to set tripwires around them. There were also flame lilies, twisted cord flowers, and black cloth trees that would either blind, paralyze, burn, or outright take the lives of their victims. Wild, wild Vietnam. Apart from huge tarantulas and spiders, there were bees, wasps, hornets, centipedes, millipedes, water leeches, huge lizards, bats, and horseflies that could also have a bite that would hurt to the point of making grown men cry for their mama. And just so we're clear, there's nothing wrong with crying for your mama. The Viet Cong employed them all, especially the wasps and hornets, as they would sneak close and lob sacks full of them into American camps to cause havoc. There were scorpions as big as a human foot with stings carrying paralytic venom. Another scary sight was the 8-inch long arthropod called Scolopendra subspinipe. These ugly-looking monsters are cool enough to prey on other dangerous animals such as tarantulas and scorpions and vinegaroons. It can also easily overpower mice and lizards and uses its venom to subdue its prey while coiling around them. Their venomous stings are not enough to kill a person, but can produce an excruciating amount of pain that could make a stay at the Hanoi Hilton look like paradise. The deadliest of all, red weaver ants, were everywhere in the wilds. Nesting in rotting logs, trees, and grounds, they could ambush and punish American troops dearly for one misstep. These blood-sucking ants would release their vengeance in hordes that were nearly inescapable as they would swarm the soldiers and repeatedly bite them in large numbers. The American troops named these ants commie ants for their stark red color, and they were also immune to the standard-issue anti-bug spray provided by the U.S. military. There were also occasional skirmishes with tigers and crocodiles. A team of 6 troopers from the 3rd Marine Recon Battalion was asked to perform a routine patrol in the wilds, but when bad weather denied them a helicopter ride back to the base in the evening, they were forced to spend the night in the woods. Unbeknownst to them, they were being stalked, and it wasn't the Viet Cong that was keeping up with them. They decided to take watches in pairs so 4 of them could rest at a time, and that's when their enemy went for its prize. A massive tiger leaped, silent as the grave, and tried to drag one of them into the bushes with it. It was the prey's call for help that alerted his teammates. Despite their attempts to stop it, the ferocious cat dragged its food for 10 meters, and Marines had to open fire on the beast. Luckily, they managed to take down the animal without hurting their colleague. That was some very good shooting. Apart from tigers and crocodiles hunting them constantly, U.S. troops had to also look out for random elephants charging at them out of nowhere. Not fun. The elusive guardian. At first, when the locals warn Marines about the phantoms of the woods, they usually shrug those warnings off simply as folklore. But in 1965, the woods of Vietnam brought real horror down upon the American troops. Many soldiers reported sightings of ghostly figures moving through the trees and fanged creatures with black eyes trying to kidnap them in the dark of the night. In one encounter, soldiers reported these creatures to be bulletproof. Kevlar? I don't need no stinking Kevlar. Most of these accounts should be taken with a grain of salt, as these soldiers were under immense amounts of stress, anxiety, and paranoia. One of the most bizarre myths that got a lot of hype around this time were the sightings of Batututs, a 6-foot-tall, long-limbed ape-man similar to Yeti and Sasquatch that had a protruding stomach and lived in a pack. Kind of reminds me of an uncle. Anyway, most sighting stories originated in the Sun Tra Peninsula around a single location called Monkey Mountain. The Americans called them rock apes, not for their habitat, but for their tendency to throw rocks at those who seemingly bothered them. Some accounts also have recalled them having red hair, and females often carrying their babies with them. The most interesting part? Vietnam has no native apes within its borders. Not even orangutans are native to Vietnam. Despite multiple reports, there is no conclusive evidence of rock apes being real and an exception to the biosphere of Vietnam. But in 1974, the general of the Vietnam People's Army even ordered an expedition to capture and research these creatures. But they never found any. What do you think? Do rock apes and ghosts exist in the woods of Vietnam? Tell us in the comments. Do subscribe to our channel and share and like this video if you would like to see more. Thanks for watching Nutty History, and we hope you guys had an amazing holiday season.